McLaren have launched their 2022 Formula One car, the MCL 36. Along with their car, they will present their driver lineup for this season, which we know remains unchanged from 2021. Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris will pilot the 2022 McLaren Formula One car and hope to build on last season, which saw the team take the only 1-2 finish of 2021 at Monza and finish fourth just behind rivals Ferrari in the championship. McLaren not only unveiled their F1 car, but have teased on social media that 3 of their other operations will also be present at the launch at the team's Woking base, namely their Extreme E, IndyCar and eSports squads. Big things will be expected of Formula One drivers, particularly Daniel Ricciardo. Despite the great performance at Monza, where he won, Ricciardo still had something missing throughout the other races. Except for the podium, he only finished in the top 5 times. And that's it. It was either below or even below the top 10. And the 115 points speak for themselves. But let's give Ricciardo the benefit of the doubt, because we all know that he has got what it takes. And he's proven it for us throughout his years in F1. But now he has had a season to get used to the Mercedes engine. He has to prepare to get used to a new car, which is built under the new regulations. So if Ricciardo is still struggling from last season, it will be pretty difficult to keep up with Lando Norris, who is determined to bring McLaren to the top. Norris joined the team as a rookie in 2019, and ever since, he has made it a mission to make McLaren competitive again. During that season, he learned a lot from his former teammate Carlos Sainz, with whom he also formed a great friendship. The two have a very different relationship to the one that he has with Daniel Ricciardo. The challenge is well and truly on for both drivers to keep on progressing and challenging the biggest teams in F1. And even though we're all looking forward to the new season and the teams are fully immersed in preparation and developments on their cars, there remains the cloud over the ending of last season and whether Lewis Hamilton returns to the grid. And McLaren CEO Zak Brown has had his say on it all, saying that mistakes were made, but any suggestions that the FIA and Formula One are corrupt is simply untrue. A number of fans were left angered by race director Michael Massey's decision to move only the lapped cars between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen in order to create a final lap shootout between the two for the title, with Verstappen on fresh tyres winning a race Hamilton had dominated. While Brown is unwilling to comment on Massey's position and the decisions during the race, specifically while an investigation is going on, he says to view the sport as corrupt rather than having mishandled the event is wrong. I think with all controversies in sport, in time, as soon as the next season starts, the wounds start to heal. I do think the FIA need to come out with a here's what happened, here's why we think it happened, here's what was right, here's what was wrong. Whatever they're going to come up with in the report, and then show they've taken action to make sure it doesn't happen again. Personal opinion, I don't think this was a malicious decision. So for those that might have a view of the sport is corrupt, etc., I don't agree with that. I do think potentially a different decision could have been made. Yes, probably, but I would want to see what the FIA comes out with. But I don't think it was malicious, and therefore I don't think it's corrupt. I think we've all seen in sport before referees make decisions that people disagree with. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. It gets pretty excited, and then the season starts, and then it becomes a thing that you forget about. But it was a thing of the past. While Hamilton has not spoken publicly since the final race and is still reportedly awaiting the outcome of the FIA's analysis before committing to racing in 2022, Brown expects the 7-time world champion to return. I think he'll be back, Brown said. He's a racing driver. I think he's at the top of his game. I'm sure he's very angry, but I think the race car drivers want to race. And I think he's a fighter, and he'll want to come back and try and win an 8th championship. I don't think he's ready to retire. This is my own personal opinion. I've not spoken to him, because once you hang it up, you hang it up. I guess you could come back, as some have done, but I don't think he's ready to hang it up, and I don't think he's going to let an incident put him into retirement. I don't know Lewis that well, but I wouldn't be shocked if he stopped, so I don't think anyone should take for granted he's coming back. My personal opinion is he's going to, but I don't think we should discount or not recognise his frustration and his anger. Maybe he hasn't made a decision, and maybe what he's doing is taking time to make that decision, to make sure, because once that decision's made, that decision's made. So I don't think we should rule it out or make light of it. I just personally think he still has a burning desire to race, and that will ultimately drive his decision. But that's just one man's opinion. The possibility that the sport's biggest star and most successful driver of all time could walk away has been a major talking point over over the winter break and has kept the pressure on the FIA. But Brown has also been unhappy with his fellow F1 team bosses for their overexcited lobbying of Michael Masi, which he says is putting on extra unwanted pressures and negativity around the sport. Brown held back no punches, blasting his F1 rivals for what he has called auditioning for a pantomime. Brown's primary displeasure was with the fact that teams presently wield too much power in the sport. The American hopes the situation will change with the arrival of the new FIA president Mohammed bin Sulayem. This is what Brown wrote about the current state of F1 and its rules and regulations. It is clear that some of the rules and their governance are not acceptable as things stand. No one is happy with the inconsistency in the policing of the regulations, but which has been habitually exploited by teams for competitive advantage. I have said before that the teams have too much power and it needs to be reduced. We have a significant role in the drafting of the regulations and governance of Formula One, and that influence is not always driven by what is best overall for the sport. It is the teams who applied the pressure to avoid finishing races under a safety car at all costs. It is the teams who voted for many of the regulations they have complained about. It is the teams who have been using the broadcasting of radio messages to the race director to try and influence penalties and race outcomes, to the point where an overexcited team principal plays to the gallery and pressurizes race officials. This has not been edifying for F1. At times, it felt like a pantomime audition rather than the pinnacle of a global sport. Brown's harsh assessment could lead to the FIA making widespread changes to the protocol currently in place in the sport. F1 Managing Director Ross Brawn has already said he would like to scrap the communication lines between team bosses and the race director. Meanwhile, former FIA President Jean Todt has called the sport too permissive with internal critics and criticism. The removal and subsequent replacement of race director Michael Masi will address the issues plaguing the sport, according to F1 pundits Johnny Herbert, Damon Hill and Martin Brundle. While discussing Masi's future in the sport, Brundle said, "What I absolutely know for sure is that changing Michael Masi will not fix the problem. This is way too big a job for one person to handle 23 races, and it's only going to grow. We're all over the world. Back in the day, there were 16 to 18 races for Charlie and Herbie, but it's just growing exponentially. So Masi, if he stays, needs a lot of support around him, and I suspect that's what they're looking at." Brown suggested the sport should roll the clock back to the days when the late Charlie Whiting, Masi's predecessor, and his deputy, Herbie Blash, worked as a team in race control. Brown also expressed confidence in Mohammed bin Sulayem, the newly elected Emirati president of the FIA, who's replaced Frenchman Jean Todt. "I've spent a good amount of time with him, and I believe he will be a change agent where things need to be changed and improved upon. He also consults," said the American. "He's already done the rounds with the teams, talking to us what we think, so I think he's going to be a very good president."